Greetings, everyone. I am Michael Hingson, and you are listening to Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And today we get to do the unexpected. And of course, what the unexpected is anything that doesn't have anything to do with inclusion or diversity. So that's most things in a lot of ways. Anyway, our guest today is Fidel, and am I pronouncing it right, Guzman?
Yes, you got it.
Oh, am I good? That comes from listening to Guzmans who play baseball.
Okay. I'll take that. That's a win.
So Fidel reached out to me some time ago. We're going to be doing some speaking to his company, Ion. But in the meanwhile, I also convinced him that he had to come on Unstoppable Mindset and talk with us, tell us about himself, tell us a lot about what he does and why he does it, and help to contribute to our general theme, which is that we're all more unstoppable than we think we are, and we usually underrate ourselves. So we try to improve by discovering that more people are unstoppable than we think they are, and that we thought they were. So that works out well. Fidel has a degree in business. He has a master's of business administration. You graduated Summa Cum Laude, which is pretty cool. And I did cum laude, but I didn't get to do sigma or magna, but that's
Okay.
okay.
hmm
Um, but that's okay. Anyway, Fidel, I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here.
Michael, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, my pleasure, and I'm looking forward to chatting and talking about some businessy things and anything else that you want to talk about. So let's start this way. It's always fun
Yeah.
to do this. Why don't we start by you telling us kind of maybe about the early Fidel growing up and some of that stuff and what got you started down the road of life, as it were.
Yeah. That's all right. Yeah, let's go back. Let's go back to where it all
A
started.
long time ago
A
in a
long
galaxy
time ago.
far, far away.
Definitely. So I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, Compton, Huntington Park area. I come from Mexican parents. They came here to the United States to give their family a better future. So I'm first generation Mexican American. Very proud. So actually, we do have a little diversity in here on this call
Oh,
today.
good. There we go. Yeah, it's good to
There
throw
we
some in.
Yeah, so first generation Mexican American. My family traveled a lot when I was young. My dad's a truck driver, so wherever there was work, he would take us along. So we grew up and raised in Los Angeles till I was 7 or 8. Then we ended up going to Mexico for a couple of years, then Dallas, then St. Louis, and then we ended up here in Chicago, here in the Midwest.
Wow.
The winters here were a bit surprising and tough when I was
Yeah.
in elementary school. I remember the first snow that I saw. It was beautiful. After 2 weeks, I was like, all right, when is it gonna go away? And I was in for the rude awakening that it's gonna stick around
Gonna
for
be
you know
around
for
a while.
for a few months or so.
Yeah.
But I've had, since then here in Chicago, we started to grow our roots, and I have five brothers and a sister, so I have a big family, a big Hispanic family. And I went to high school my freshman year. I went to Lane Tech for all my folks who are familiar with the Chicagoland area. And then I ended up going to transferring over to Morton West in Berwyn. After I graduated high school, I went to Northeastern Illinois University, my alma mater. I got my undergrad in business management and marketing, and also got my master's in business administration. So I am a proud double alumni from Northeastern Illinois University, and I really owe this community of Northeastern Illinois University a lot with respect to the great teachers that they have there, the community that they try to build, and the friends and that I made along the way, as well as the education, of course, that helped me expand my career opportunities. After I graduated from Northeastern Illinois University with my undergrad, I started my first real corporate role inside of Backstop Solutions. And Backstop Solutions was a still was a great company to be a part of. Lots of mentors. If I can, actually, I would like to give a quick shout out to a few mentors that I had along the way, such as Deanne Falk, Richard Fu, our CEO, our legacy CEO, Clint Coghill, Sarah Schroeder, and the current head of learning and development under Ion, Alexandra Lloyd.
Hmm.
And I really want to thank them for all their mentorship and leadership because it's really helped me get and grow to the person that I am today. So with that, yeah, I am the manager of internal training at Ion. I came in via an acquisition when Backstop was acquired. And throughout that period, I had some free time, so to say, and ended up getting my master's in business administration.
And so along the way, did you get yourself married and all that?
Oh, my wife is gonna kill me. Yes, along the way, I did
Sorry
get
about
married.
that.
No, yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, can't forget about those significant others. But yes, I am married. My wife has a master's in occupational therapy, so she's in the medical field, and
Mm.
I'm in like the business learning and development side of things. So our conversations are pretty interesting, as well as our perspectives on things. I also have a daughter. She's 16 going on 17. People are usually very surprised when I tell them the age of my daughter, but had her early when I was in my early 20s, so young dad, and she was a blessing. I wouldn't have it any other way.
That is great. Why did you decide to go into business and study business in college?
So interestingly enough, when I got into college, I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. I wanted to be cool Mr. Guzman, because I also really I love kids. I love working with kids. I was also a mixed martial arts program coordinator and instructor at an elementary school on the south side of Chicago for 3 years, and that was during my undergrad. And I taught all grades, kindergarten through eighth grade, some of the basics in boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and kickboxing, so a bit of both. But as I was going through my clinicals, as I was going through the education aspect of it, I ended up wanting to switch majors. So I was like, hey, there's probably a lot more opportunity for growth inside of the business segment. So I ended up switching my majors to business management and marketing, and somehow learning just found its way back into my life. So a lot of the stuff that I learned from some of those preliminary courses in education, I mean, still resonant to this day, right? Understand your audience, understand which students are visual learners, which ones are experiential learners, which one need more repetitive exercise to drill something in. So yeah, the universe did not lead me too far away from teaching and
Mm-mm.
being an instructor, and yeah, here I am.
I know that feeling well. So a couple things. First of all, I was born in Chicago, but we moved to California when I was 5. But in Chicago, you start kindergarten at the age of 4. So I went for a year to a special kindergarten class that my parents and others advocated for premature blind kids because there were a whole bunch in the Chicago area. During the whole baby boomer era, a number of children were born prematurely and given a pure oxygen environment, which caused them to lose their eyesight. And so the bottom line is that happened to me, among others. And so I went to the Perry School. I don't even know if it's around anymore. Somebody told me it wasn't around anymore, but that's where I went to school and
Okay, yeah.
went there for a year of kindergarten, learned Braille and other things. And then we moved to California. I always wanted to be a teacher as well. And I came at teaching from a different standpoint as you did. That is to say, while I wanted to be a teacher, my first job out of college wasn't directly teaching, except I ended up having to write training materials and do other things like that. And then I ended up going into sales. And what I learned is that the best salespeople are really teachers. They're counselors, they guide, and they help people, especially when you're dealing with major account sales. They help people look at products. They teach about what their product does. And the really good salespeople are brave enough to admit when their product might not be the best fit for someone, because it's also all about building trust. And good teachers are concerned about building trust as well, of course.
Yeah, one of my teachers when I was close to graduating, one of the things that, this teacher, Dr. Funk, if I remember correctly, he instilled in us, if you're able to synthesize what you learned and explain it to a 5-year-old, you've done a good job. Like you yourself understand that particular concept or that particular topic. And I really took that to heart. So now, in a lot of these roles, if I'm the main instructor, I want and need to be able to explain it, to my kid, to explain it in simple terms, and of course, expand on it if needed. But
But it ultimately comes down to you can provide all the information you want, but they have to teach themselves really. And they're not going to do that and they're not going to listen to you if they don't trust you. So, trust is a vital part of what we do.
exactly, spot on.
And I have found that developing that trust is so extremely important. I learned a lot about trust from working with guide dogs, right from the very first guide dog that I obtained back in 1964 when I was 14. It was all about building a team. And although I didn't know how to really externally say it necessarily until many years later, internally I understood that my job was to build a relationship and that I was going to be the team leader and needed to be able to gain trust as well as trust my teammate in what we did. So it worked out pretty well though.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. So what does Ion do? What is Ion?
Yeah, for sure. So Ion is a essentially you can think of it as a software company for the investment community. We provide a number of different platforms for them to streamline their processes and track information or be end users of data.
So people buy your software and do what?
Uh, they can either leverage the data that's being provided to them, or they can include data within specific platforms.
Hmm. Are you starting to see that this whole concept of so-called AI is valuable in what you do, or is Ion working with that yet?
Yes, definitely. We are big on streamlining processes and making sure that we're maximizing the best use of everyone's time. And AI really has a really important component in that. So for learning and development, one of the ways that we're using AI is for content creation. So whether it's just creating a simple outline for a course or starting to use that to create slides, but we're also taking a look at the way AI can be used on a regular basis to provide feedback for reps. Like, let's say someone finishes a demo, if they want to do some self-reflection, they can leverage AI to get some feedback on what worked well, what didn't. Was there enough engagement? How was my use of technology? So on and so forth. So not only is AI being used from, creating content, but also as like a ad hoc instructor and way to generate feedback.
Well, and it offers so much versatility. You can really have it go many different ways. So it is very possible it can be um, an instructor, as you say, an ad hoc instructor, but it really can present its information in a good teaching way too. So you can have conversations with it. You can do the same sorts of things that you would do with a teacher. I think that AI clearly is here to stay, but I think over time AI is going to evolve a lot. I am not of the opinion that AI will replace people for a variety of reasons, but I think that it's here and it's up to us to be smart as to how we use it.
Definitely. I think one of the tips that we always give people is AI does a really great job of a number of different things, but it's always going to need that human touch at the end of the day. So don't just take some content that AI has created and take it to heart. Make sure to review it, make sure to put that personal touch on there and have it speak your language, have it really resonate with the audience as well. Or
Especially
also,
that. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
or also it'll just sound super mechanical, super scripted.
Well, and I think as AI grows, it's going to try to emulate, or we're going to use it to try to emulate people more and more, but it still isn't going to get to the point where it truly is me or you. And we do have to put our mark on it. I've used it to help create several articles.
Oh,
And
nice.
what I've done when I do that is I'll tell it what I want it to write about and let it do it. And it comes up with some pretty good ideas that I incorporate into the article that I create between what it provides and what I add to the mix. And it really should be that way. What
Exactly.
I've
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
I've really found interesting is the number of people, like in classrooms, who say, teachers who say, it's really harder and harder and harder to tell when a student uses AI to write a paper or if the student is doing it themselves. And the first time I heard that, immediately my idea of what to do was something like this. Let the student use AI if they want to have AI do the whole paper. What you ought to do is to have one day after all the students turn their papers in where you bring each student up to the front of the class and say, defend your paper now. You have 1 minute. If they don't
I
really
love it.
know, yeah, I mean, if they don't
I
know
love
what's going on, then they're not going to be able to do very well and they fail.
Yes, I am a big proponent of comprehensive exercises and also public speaking.
Hmm.
How well can you articulate the thought that you gave in that paper, right? Some of those different talking points.
Right.
Can you convey the same message in front of the classroom?
Yeah, and you can tell if a person is just not necessarily a great public speaker or they're nervous, as opposed to whether they know the subject.
Yeah,
And those, in a sense, are two different things. But you can use the fact that students are at the front of the classroom to help make them better speakers too, which is a good thing.
yeah. No, no, yeah, I agree with you. If they are using AI just to you know, turn around a paper, have them present in front of the classroom. Yeah, let's talk a bit more about your paper
Yeah.
and and really have it be an interactive exercise. I think that's really where the end goal is going to be. Now that AI has really taken over the way the classroom dynamic has changed. So having more of those interactive exercises, really taking a look at comprehension, whether somebody really understands that topic, and giving students and an audience an opportunity to discuss. How do we create a hive mind mentality around this particular topic, especially in a classroom?
Right.
Whether that's in a school setting in academia or whether that's in a corporate setting inside of an office.
Several months ago, we had a guest on Unstoppable Mindset who is an executive leadership coach in Northern California who was a major proponent of AI. And when he worked with companies and especially with presidents and leaders who were stuck on how we evolve and how we grow, he would bring AI into all those meetings. And one day he was dealing with one such situation where he told the president, you ought to use AI to get some great ideas."
Yeah.
The president took that to heart, called his senior leadership staff in, and said, "Take the rest of this day and create ideas about how you think we ought to do things better and so on, and use AI to do it." And when everyone came in the next day, they had a lot of innovative and creative ideas, and all loved the fact that he encouraged them to use AI. And that led to us having a discussion about, is AI going to really take over the jobs that people do? And both of us agreed, no, AI won't. AI can't replace anyone. We can fire somebody and then put AI in their place, which doesn't really work well. But what is a better thing is let
Yeah.
AI do what it does well. So the example that he gave was, say you have autonomous vehicles. As autonomous vehicles become more and more prevalent, like trucks that are delivering supplies, like shipping vehicles and so on, let
Mhm.
the autonomous vehicle drive, but the driver needs to still be in the cabin and needs to be behind the wheel, even though they're not doing anything because they are going to let the autonomous vehicle do what it can do. But you can give those people other assignments to do for the company that will keep them busy and do things that otherwise might not be done quite as efficiently. So the bottom line is you keep people busy, you use the autonomous vehicle,
Yeah.
and it's a win-win situation all the way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah, great. I've heard something very similar to that. And maybe if I can synthesize this, it's going to be that we want to remove manual tasks out of people's times, and we want them to focus on more higher value add activities. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's true. Um, Isaac Asimov, years ago, the science fiction writer, wrote a really wonderful science fiction story about a young man who lived in a society where everyone had a particular job to do, and you were matched with your talents. And so you take a test when you're like 8 years old, and or even younger, and that starts you down the road of what it is you're supposed to do for the whole country. And then you take another test several years later, and that locks you into what you're trained to do. So you always do the same task, but you do it well because that's what you're trained to do. Well, this kid was in the whole process taking his tests, and he just wasn't comfortable with what was going on. And eventually he ran away and what he took the last test. Apparently, they looked at him kind of funny when they looked at the results, and he didn't like what was going on, and he just left. He said, "I'm not going to do this. I don't want to be an engineer. I don't want to do whatever it is that they want." And they eventually caught up with him, and they caught him, and they said, "Why'd you run away?" And he told them, and they said, "No, you don't understand what just happened. Some people in society are the people who create the tests, create the processes, and don't get trained to do a specific thing because they're the innovators and the inventors that keep society going. And you're one of those kids." And this was like, what, 50 years ago that he wrote that.
Oh, wow.
So it is really interesting, but very true. Um, and the reality is we can be as creative as we choose to be, and some people are more creative than others, but there are always tasks that we can find for anyone to do, and that will make them very happy.
Absolutely. Definitely.
So it works out. It does work out really well. Well, a question for you. Um, you have a leadership philosophy, needless to say, and you lead a lot in instructional design. What are the core principles, or what are the things that kind of make up how you teach leadership, and what it is that you teach people to do, and how do you go about team development?
Yeah. I think some of the core principles that I really focus on with learning and development and instructional design. Number one, it has to be collaboration. It really does take a community to put some really good training sessions and training opportunities in place. And it's really leveraging all the expertise from different subject matter experts, give them a chance to share their perspectives and their insights on certain things, but also really just to enhance, the use of these training programs because people are more keen to listen to like, oh yeah, this guy's a subject matter, he's an expert in this particular space, and for them to hop on. So I think that collaboration aspect is, getting the lean in from managers like, hey, this training is important. Your employees are going to benefit from this training, whether it's just for to develop their education, to develop their career, whatever that may look like. But I want to say one of the first guiding principles is going to have to be collaboration. The second one is going to have to be most likely continuous improvement as we start to roll out a lot of these different training sessions, whether it's public speaking, whether it's product training, whether it's industry training. If we roll it out, we keep our ear to the ground and make sure that we're receptive to the feedback. We take a look at what works well, what doesn't work well, what needs to be tailored. How can we also manage this across different time zones? So Ion is a super global company. I want to say over 13,000 employees in over 13 plus countries. So also managing what those training programs look
Hmm.
like for everyone across the board. So besides the collaboration, besides the continuous improvement, or I like to also say that the Kaizen, the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen, right, making those small improvements. The last one I want to say is going to be innovation. How can we incorporate, right? We were talking about AI. How can we incorporate some of these latest tech trends into what our training delivery looks like? Whether it's something as simple as how do we include more polls throughout a lecture to keep people engaged and participate? How do we include knowledge checks at the end of every session to make sure that people are walking away with some of the key takeaways? So, yeah, collaboration, continuous improvement, and innovation. Yeah, how do we stay innovative and stay creative? I think having some fun, staying creative along the way definitely resonates with your audience as you're trying to do different things and trying to keep things as engaging and fun as possible.
What do you say to someone who says, "Look, I've really learned all I need to learn. I'm not really interested in learning anything new."
That
I
is,
know, isn't that?
yeah,
But yeah, but you hear it a lot, I'm sure,
yeah. Um, I
or
think
too
I think
much.
I think some people get comfortable, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm comfortable with what I know. And learning does require a certain level of mental energy. And it also requires a certain level of you being willing to take on a new challenge, to take
Yeah.
on and learn something new. So to them, I would genuinely ask, what's your interest? How can we supplement what this interest looks like?
Mm.
What are your interests in other avenues? And I think that will plant the seed to let them know that learning and development should be something, learning, right? Just learning in general. It should be
Hmm.
something that you should do throughout your life. I recently started a podcast called The Hero in the Mirror. And I wanted to take a moment and actually thank you, Michael. I don't know if you remember our initial conversation, but
Hmm.
we were talking about, you had asked me, what ideas do you have? What are you working on? Are you working on any books, any podcasts? And I had mentioned, I was like, hey, I actually have an idea for a podcast. And you paused for a moment and you were like, what's stopping it?
Yeah.
And it was kind of like it kind of took me back. I'm like, what is stopping me, right? And sometimes and in coaching we call it interference. Like you probably have a fear of failure. You have a fear that something's not going to go right, or this task seems enormous that you don't know where to start.
Yeah.
So making small mental changes, making small steps, I think definitely add up. Since then, Michael, I've had 3 episodes. I've had some great guests hop on and share their story of resilience and triumph. And as I'm starting to do more episodes, I'm hearing stories of people willing to have that mindset of I want to continue to learn. I want to
Hmm.
continue to expand on the person that I am and make myself well-rounded in these different areas. So long story short, if somebody says I don't need to learn anything, there's always room for growth. There's always room for interest. What interests you and how can we follow that interest and supplement it with some training content?
I know for me, I'm extremely comfortable with what I know and I'm extremely comfortable with what I've learned, but I'm also very uncomfortable in knowing there's a lot of stuff I don't know and that I still need to learn. So, I
True.
I
Yeah.
love to learn. Right from the very beginning, when I first discovered the internet, I regarded it and still do, no matter what there is with the dark web and everything else. I think the internet is a treasure trove of information, and it's so fun to discover new things online. And there's so many ways to go. We've got so many places where we can go get books that we never had access to before, all of us. There's so many places where we can go to learn about organizations, about people. There's just so many wonderful things. And it's only one way because I also think there is a lot to be said for real personal interactions. But I think the internet is a wonderful treasure trove that gives us the opportunity to learn a whole lot that we don't necessarily know about subjects that we don't know anything about.
Uh, the internet is a double-sided sword.
It
You
is.
you can find information that will support right? Maybe, an opinion that you have. On the other side of that, you can find lots of information that does not support
Yeah,
an opinion that you have. And also, it's a rabbit hole as soon as you
it
start
is.
going down that rabbit hole. But the one thing I do appreciate from the internet is the channels of communication that it's built.
Yeah.
And I'm appreciative of being able to have connected with you on LinkedIn, and that's turned out to us having this podcast here today.
I think that for me, I'm not as interested on going online and finding something to change an opinion as much as I am finding something that will tell me about something that I didn't know as much about. Now, I might change my opinion from what I thought it might be, but I really love to try to really get as much as possible into dealing with facts or substance to teach me things, and then I'll form my own opinion from that.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Get a good grounding of all the materials, synthesize it yourself.
Yeah. And I think we should do that. I think we have to be the one to synthesize whatever it is we're dealing with. That's our responsibility, and that should always be the way it is.
Yeah.
Which is, and I don't want to get political or anything, but which is one of the reasons that I say any politician who says trust me will be the first person I won't trust until I verify. I am a firm believer in trust but verify. I don't care
Yeah,
who it is. I think it's
exactly.
so important that we really take the time. Every single person needs to take the time to study what's going on, and and really look at all sides of something. I think that's important. I listen to newscasts regularly, and I like to listen to newscasts from all sides. Some I find why I don't want to listen to them very much because of what they do or don't do, but I still think that it's important to really understand all sides of a subject.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you.
So, I think it is kind of neat to have that opportunity, and I think we learn so much when we take the time to really study. I'm amazed. I was at a restaurant once, and my wife and I were there. We were talking about newspapers and what we get from newspapers or online, and our waitress came up and Karen said, "So do you read the newspaper?" And this woman's 30 years old, and she says, "No, I don't. I don't have time." You know, and how little she learns because she doesn't really seek information, which is too bad.
Yep, people have to be receptive. People have to be receptive to gaining new bits of information, and sometimes people are just happy knowing, like you mentioned earlier, just happy knowing what they know, just comfortable in their own space. And
Until something
more power to them.
happens.
More
Yeah,
more power to them. More power to them.
until something happens to disrupt the happiness and surprises them because they really didn't learn enough to know that that was a possibility.
Yep.
I never thought I would be doing a podcast. But when the pandemic occurred, I
Hmm.
started to learn about it and learned all the value of it. Now, I had been at our campus radio station at UC Irvine for six
Hmm.
years, and I was program director 1 year. So I understood radio. And when I started learning about podcasting, I went, this is really pretty cool. And I had never thought about it and had never been interviewed on a podcast. But I realized I know what I can do with this, and I know that I can sound intelligent on the air. And so I started to learn about it, and here we are now. Just today, actually, we published online and in YouTube episode 324 of Unstoppable Mindset since August of 2021.
Congratulations, Michael.
Well,
That's
thank you.
great.
It's a lot of fun. We actually
Yeah.
went to two episodes a week in August of 2022
Oh, wow.
because we had such a huge backlog. And
Yeah.
I don't mind having a huge backlog, but it,
Yeah.
it was growing way too much. So we went to
Yeah.
two episodes a week, and it's a lot of fun to do it. And as I love to tell people, for me, the most important thing is that I get to learn from every single person who comes on the podcast. It's so neat to be able to do that.
Of course.
So it works out really well. Well, for you, what kind of challenges have you faced? What have you done to overcome challenges, and what are some of the biggest challenges you faced, and how you deal with them?
Okay, yeah, that's great. That's some of the questions I use on my podcast, the Here in the Mirror. So I'm on the other side of that chair today. So
That'll teach you.
challenge, yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's a good question. So I want to say, there are three main challenges that really stand out for me. One, I'm very vocal about, and that is my speech impediment, my stuttering problem. It was really bad when I was a little kid. I had a speech pathologist. Even now, talking to you on this podcast, I have to be very conscious with what I'm saying. Some of the listeners might have caught it in the beginning when I get too excited about a particular topic, or if I haven't formulated my thought yet. But the speech impediment is something that has really made public speaking a passion for me. It was
Mm,
hard for me to have a voice when I was a little kid. I used to try to raise my hand and answer a question when I was in elementary school, and and the teacher would be like, "All right, next one." Like you had your turn. And so I've struggled, to have a voice. I struggled with just completing sentences.
mm.
And the way that I overcame that is through a speech pathologist that really gave me the confidence to believe in myself. I remember one exercise she gave me one day is she grabbed me from my classroom. She would pick me up from my classroom every Tuesday and Thursday. And she picked me up one day, and I was kind of down in the dumps 'cause I didn't really like going to the class. We weren't really advancing much. And she's like, "Hey, we're going to try something different today." She's like, "Today I'm going to have you order a pizza." And I was still a little fat kid. I think I was like fourth or fifth grade. So I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm all for it. What's going on here?" And she was like, "But the catch is you need to order this pizza without stuttering." And
Mm.
right away, kind of my heart dropped. And she's like, "Okay, like don't worry, we're gonna practice exactly what you want to order." And she's like, "What do you want?" And I'm like, "Well, I want a large pepperoni pizza with a 2 liter RC cola delivered to McPherson Elementary." And she's like, "Okay," she's like, "Write it down." I'm like, "All right, great." She's like, "Write it down again." I must have written it like 10 times. She's like, now practice it." So about 15 minutes of doing that, she was like, "All right, I think you're ready." She hands me the phone, and I pick it up. My heart's in my throat, and I'm just like I'm like, "Hi, I want to order a large pepperoni pizza with a 2 liter RC cola delivered to McPherson Elementary for Fidel Guzman." And I was just astonished. I hung up the phone. I was happy for two reasons. Number one, I was gonna get some pizza, and number two, I was able to say a complete full sentence without stuttering. And she really believed in me and instilled in me that confidence that I could overcome this. But it wasn't an overnight success. It
Well,
still required me going to the speech pathologist, throughout my elementary school, throughout all those years, and even as an adult, continuing to practice and hone that in high school, doing presentations, in college, doing presentations. So right now, I am the VP of Education for our America's Toastmasters Club, and this is one story I always tell people, and they're like, "No, you don't stutter." I'm like, if I get too excited, I'll fumble over my words. But that was one challenge. That was one challenge, and it still is. It's still something I have to be very conscious of. And I've caught myself a couple times earlier in this podcast where I kind of mumble a little bit or get caught up in a particular word. But besides that one, I want to say the second one was more of my in college. In college, I struggled paying for school. I mentioned I'm first generation Mexican American, and I was one of the first of my brothers to attend college full time, and I did all I could to make ends meet. Two, three jobs, just paying for tuition. Financial aid was great, it really helped me with a portion of that, but a lot of it really ended up, being due onto me. And then I had my daughter, and it was just a struggle. I was like, how can I be a dad? How can I be a student? How can I work on my career? And I had gone to a financial aid workshop. And the one thing that stood out in this workshop was when they were talking about scholarships. Granted, in high school, when you're about to graduate, they talk to you about it, but it doesn't really
Hmm.
materialize until you receive that bill.
Yeah.
Until you're just like, hey, here's a $2,000 bill for this college class, and you're like, oh man, this is not cheap. This is pretty expensive. And the one thing, that stood out was, like the scholarships, and they started talking about scholarship applications. And I found that there were a couple common denominators with these scholarships. Number one, they wanted two letters of recommendation. Number two, they want an essay. What are you going to do with your degree? How are you going to make a positive impact in the community? And number three, sometimes typically an interview. And so I ran with it. I was like, they want two letters of recommendation. They want one essay. They want an interview. No problem. And I made that my part-time job. On the weekends, I would just apply, apply, apply. And I started getting some small wins. I started getting a $250 scholarship here, a $500 scholarship there, $1,000 scholarship, here. And all of it started to add up and it started to gain momentum. And I was lucky enough to get accepted for a number of different scholarships and complete my college education, and even be strong-willed enough to go back and do it again and try to get my master's. So those were two big ones. But I'll pause here and see if you have any questions around those two challenges for me, Michael.
No, I really admire what you did. You made a choice and you followed it through. And I think that's, of course, the whole issue is that we have to make choices and we need to follow through. And if we find that we need to refine our decisions, we do that. I know when I was a student and a program director at the university radio station, I wanted everyone to listen to themselves. I thought it was a great idea to have everyone listen to themselves on the air. And the way you do it is you record it and you give it to
Yeah.
them.
Hmm.
And I didn't anticipate how hard that was going to be because for me, I was used to doing it for myself.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize how much resistance I was going to get from literally everyone at the radio station. They were not interested in and thrilled about doing it at all. What I and the engineer at the station did eventually was to put a cassette recorder in a locked cupboard.
Yeah.
And whenever the microphone was activated, the recorder would go on. So, you
Yeah.
didn't have to hear the music, you just wanted to hear yourself talk.
Yeah.
And we really took a major step and said you have to listen to these recordings. We gave each person a cassette. We expect you to listen to these recordings and improve accordingly. What I
Hmm.
didn't say much was I know what it's like. I'm my own worst critic and I have to listen to it.
Yeah.
So you guys do. Now, I've changed that and I'll get to it in a second, but we pushed everyone to do it. And it wasn't long, not only before we started seeing improvement, but before the people themselves started recognizing that they were really getting comfortable listening to themselves and that they were taking this to heart. And by the end of the year, we had people who were loving it and wanting their cassette every day or every week. And also, some of them went into broadcasting. For me, what I learned, and it took many years before I learned it, is I'm not my own worst critic. I shouldn't be negative. As I said earlier, I'm the only one who can really teach me. I'm my own best teacher. And I
Yeah.
think when you make that mind shift from being your own worst critic to your own best teacher, it really puts things in a much more positive light. And I've said that before on the podcast, and I will continue to say it because I think it's a very important concept.
We actually have a similar exercise for our America's Toastmasters Club. We'll record some speeches and we'll have people listen back to their recorded speech. And a lot of people say, like, man, it's cringe to hear yourself on the on the other
Yeah.
side of those headphones. But it is a very useful exercise. You get a better understanding of your filler words, your ahs, your
Mm-hmm.
your vocal variety, your body language, And if you're looking to be a great, I don't want to say public speaker, but if you're just looking just to speak better in general, even when it's on a presentation, on a call, or if you have to give a toast at a wedding
Yeah.
or a quinceañera, for you to be able to, yeah, critique yourself and gather feedback from your own recording.
Well, and the reality is the more of it you do, and the more you listen to it, having been up there in front giving the speech, you also see how people react. And if you continue to observe and listen to the recordings as you go forward, you will improve,
Yeah, for sure.
which is really important. And one of the things that I try to do regularly now is to record talks when I go and give a speech somewhere. I will
Okay.
record it so that I can listen to it. And I enjoy it because I discover, did I really say that? I shouldn't have said it quite that way. But I'll do better next time. But listening to it helps such a tremendous amount.
Especially with those filler words. So when you were listening to the recording, you'll be like, man, I use a lot of likes
Yeah.
or so's or ands or buts. And if you want to speak eloquently, it is, I mean, like anything, you just got to practice it. You got to
Yeah.
practice it. And you have to be receptive to the feedback. And you have to also celebrate the small wins. One thing I am a big proponent on is celebrate the small wins.
Yeah.
So if you were able to do your first speech at a Toastmasters clubs, like we give you tons of accolades because it is not an easy fit,
Mm-mm.
an easy feat. If you're able to do the second one, even better. You're progressing and you're increasing your understanding of some of the fundamentals of public speaking. Yeah, so you're preaching to the choir here.
Yeah. No, I understand. It
No, you
is,
got it. No, yeah, it's good.
but it is really important to do. And it's
Mhm.
fun to do if you decide to make it fun and if you decide that you want to become a better communicator. There are lots of uhs and all that sort of stuff that people do. I've heard some people say that's really not such a bad thing. Well, I've got to say that I've never really been used to having a lot of uhs and I've there's a guy out here who I don't even think he's alive anymore. He used to be a sports announcer out here. His name was
Mhm.
Jim Healy.
Mhm.
Um, and you may have heard him when, well, out here in Los Angeles anyway. He was on KLAC and he had somebody, well, he had a recording of somebody, one of the sports jocks, and he announced that he was going to play this recording. And what you're going to hear is this guy in 60 seconds say, 48 times.
Oof, that's
And he
tough.
did. It was amazing.
That when you get to some of those, it's like what do they say? Nails on a chalkboard. You're like, oh
Yeah.
man, you're like, "Dude, what are you trying to say? Just say it. Just say the damn thing.
Yeah. Talk a little bit slower and just say it.
One thing that I'm trying to be more conscious of is pauses.
Mm-hmm.
Like those deliberate pauses to collect your thoughts. Like I often need just to collect myself, but also to build suspense
Mm-hmm.
in the message that you're trying to give. Especially when you're in front of a group of people, in front of an audience, and you're pausing there. They're just like, oh, what is he gonna say next? What's going
Yeah.
on? What's going on with this pause? So it's also you have this arsenal of tools when it comes to public speaking and to engage with an audience
Yeah.
and to keep them interested in what your next thought is going to be. What am I going to say next? How am I going to, align this topic to something else that I want to discuss
I love
or
pauses.
conclude? Yeah.
I've discovered the value of pauses. You can make a pause last too long, and one of the things you learn is how long to make a pause. But I love pauses; they really
Yeah.
do add a lot of value.
They're really good. Man.
Well, you talk a lot about continuous improvement,
Mhm.
and clearly you really love the whole concept. What's an example of a project where you instituted continuous improvement, and how do you make that happen?
Thanks, Michael. It's a
See,
good
there's that
question.
pause again.
Yeah, right. I know. Yeah, I'm like, oh, all right. Michael's throwing me well, not much of a curveball, but yeah, no, that's good. So
I know.
continuous improvement and one project that I worked on. I want to say one that comes to mind is last year I hosted a series of product boot camps. And what these product boot camps really were product training and networking opportunities within Ion. I
Mm,
had just gone through the acquisition of Backstop into the Ion family, and I saw a need. I saw a need there for some product training. And what I did is I started to coordinate with subject matter experts, hence the collaboration and community principles that I have with learning and development, and started to piece together a boot camp, so a series of training sessions. And we discussed location, we discussed, different components that we can include on there. We discussed remote, hybrid, in person, what some of those options were. And we had about, I want to say 5 or 6 of these boot camps in 2024. And what I noticed is that for each of the boot camps, we would tailor it a little bit because each of these different products that were under specific umbrellas were for certain audiences, for certain segments of the business. So I had a template, but we had to tweak that template a little bit.
mm,
Who do we want to come in here? Who do we want to come in for this particular topic? When do we take breaks? If it's in person, do we take longer breaks? If it's in person, how do we include some interactive components to it? How do we test people's knowledge, whether it's through live polls, whether it's using an LMS platform to do knowledge checks? How do we create a certificate-based program around this? And for each of those, it was a learning experience. It was a learning experience because every subject matter expert is different, right? You're building different
hmm
relationships with different people, and even their style of talking or their style of teaching a particular topic is going to be different. So those continuous improvements throughout each of those boot camps really started to resonate and just showcase themselves. And for each of those, we had a similar template for all of them, but we made minor tweaks to make sure that it was as engaging and thoughtful as possible.
Wow. Well, that's pretty cool. And I think that the very fact that you would make the tweaks and you recognize the need to do that was pretty insightful, of course,
Yeah.
because for me, I know when I speak, some people early on told me you should write a talk and you should you should just give that talk. I tried that once. I didn't like what I sounded like when I read a talk, and I haven't done it since. And I also realized that I do better, and sometimes it isn't necessarily a lot, but when I customize every talk. So I love to go early and try to hear speakers who speak before me or get a chance to meet people at an event
Mhm.
because I will learn things invariably that I will put into the talk. And sometimes I'm tweaking talks up to and including the start of the talk. And sometimes I will tweak a talk when I'm speaking and I'm getting the impression just from all the fidgeting that
Yeah.
maybe I'm not getting through to these people or I'm
Yeah.
not really doing this in the best way possible. And I will change
Yeah.
until I get what I expect to be the audience reaction because I know what an audience is like when they're fully engaged. And I also know that not every audience is the same. So I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to do that.
Yeah, for you to be able to do that on the fly, kudos, kudos to that. But yeah, you got to be able to understand that audience, understand what's going on, the dynamic of that situation. So you're you're a veteran at this, so no surprise there.
Well, it's a lot of fun. Well, what do you do when you're not working? I know you're involved in various activities and so on. So what do you do when you're
Yeah,
not at
oh
Ion
man,
writing
let's
and
see.
doing
Yeah.
training stuff and all that?
A number of different hobbies. My wife calls me the Energizer Bunny because I'm always running around doing something. But some of my main things is right now judo.
Mm,
I did wrestling in high school, and I did mixed martial arts when I was getting my undergrad. And I love martial arts. I think iron sharpens iron. It's good to be around a good group of people, people who are like-minded, people who are looking to continue to develop themselves. And yeah, if you're in a room full of tough guys, you have no other choice than to start to be a tough guy yourself. So I love martial arts. I did a couple judo tournaments, judo and jiu-jitsu tournaments last year where I placed. And let's see, besides that, triathlons, I love to run, I love to bike, I love to swim. I did my first triathlon last year. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a phenomenal experience. I mean, it's 2, 3 hours of nonstop movement, but it was great just to be part of that of a huge event like that. Besides the martial arts and the constant running and swimming and biking, the last thing I want to say is writing and poetry. I have started to compile all my poems.
mm,
Hopefully, in the next year or so, I'll launch a small book of poems. And yeah, I'll keep you posted on that. But I do like to write on the side.
there you
Hopefully a
go.
book of poems. And since having my daughter, I've always liked children's books. I
Mm.
would I would love it if I could launch my own series of children books. And I'm working on a couple templates with that. So yeah, staying busy, physically active, but also mentally active.
So you haven't written any books yet?
I have a couple ideas of what kids books I
Right.
want to do.
But you don't have any books published yet.
No, none yet, none yet.
Well,
So
we're anxious to see that happen.
you got you got it. You're gonna light that fire. You're gonna light that fire as well. No, and again, right, I do appreciate you for really motivating me to start my own podcast because you had really said like what's stopping you? Like me. I'm stopping myself, you know? But
Several.
even yeah, even like, being an author, I know that you're an author, I would love to have a conversation offline with you of,
Sure.
what that publishing experience was like because I think that's my biggest interference right now with that is like I don't know where to start with the publishing. I know I can self-publish. I know I can go through publishers, and like the internet, like we said, a double-sided sword.
Yeah.
Like you
Mm,
have information that tells you should just self-publish, and then you have other bits of information was like you should go through a publishing company, and I'm just like
yeah.
where do I choose? But I think that's why having mentors, and getting to network with people who are experienced, such as yourself, in these different avenues of public speaking and being a keynote speaker and having a podcast, being a podcast host, and being an author, I think I think it's great. And you are definitely an inspiration to me, Michael.
Well, thank you. Um, you're familiar with Jackson Hewitt, the accounting and tax company?
You got it,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay. So I can't remember whether it was 2016 or 2017, but I got invited to go speak at one of their events, and I did. And while I was there, I met a woman, and I didn't know what she did, and she worked at a Jackson Hewitt, and I just happened to say, "Well, do you own a firm?" Because most of the people there were supposed to be company owners, and she said, "No, maybe someday." And I said, "Why not? You ought to own a company. You ought to become a company owner. You'll go
There
further."
you go.
Anyway,
Yeah.
last year she sent me an email, and she said, "I've never forgotten that." And I think it was like a year later or 2 years later, after she met,
Yeah.
she said, "I got my first company and I now own 10 branches." And I wrote
Wow.
back and I said, "That's pretty cool."
Michael,
You
you are
know,
just making ripples in the universe. Just ripples in the
doing
universe.
doing something.
Yeah, that's good. I don't want to get too religious, but you're doing God's work, man.
Well, I hope so. Well,
Yeah.
I expect he'll guide or she'll guide.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so what do you think is the future of workplace training and learning?
Yeah. I think we touched a little bit upon this, but AI, definitely how can we leverage AI for content creation, creating outlines, and also using it as feedback. But I also want to to bring back the in-person training. I know
Hmm.
we've all gotten very comfortable with, doing stuff remote, but similar to the example that we talked about earlier, where that teacher was like, "Oh, all these kids are using AI for these papers, and how do I really test their comprehension?" That's something, that in-person activity,
Yeah.
I think definitely has a tremendous amount of value, not just for the instructor, but for the end learner.
Yeah.
So I think a mixture of like, okay, great, how can we use AI to create content? How can we use it to provide, feedback for people to continue to improve on certain areas? But how can we bring back that in-person component
For me,
to
oh, go ahead.
yeah, to unify, and it was probably that pause that took you to unify a vision, a vision of continuous improvement, that to unify that vision of what a team might be aiming for.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think long story short, it's going to be, leveraging a bit of AI and still bringing back that in-person aspect.
Well, I've done virtual presentations as well as, of course, lots of in-person presentations. I much
Yeah.
prefer in-person to virtual, but my main reason for that is that I can tell what the audience is feeling. I get a lot more information if I'm doing an in-person talk than I
Hmm.
would get if I'm just doing a virtual talk. Now,
Yeah.
I've done it long enough that I mostly can do pretty well at a virtual talk, but it's still not the same.
Yeah.
And I
It's
still
not.
don't get exactly the same information, but I can do virtual talks and I do. And it's fun. And I can play games with it because I can always turn my video off and really drive people crazy. But but
Uh,
what advice would you give to an aspiring leader who wants to evolve and
yeah.
make changes to their organization or to themselves and so on?
I want to say for this one, sorry, I think we have sorry, we had some background noise there.
Hmm.
All right, great. Sorry, did you hear that, or was
No,
that was that
no,
was
I
that
didn't
fine?
hear it.
No. Oh, okay. All right. So
Flying saucers coming to get you.
yeah. So advice I would give for aspiring leaders. I think the main one that I really focus on is opportunities and challenges. Be ready to embrace any opportunities that come your way. But just know that each of those opportunities is going to come with its own set of challenges.
Mhm.
And be prepared for both. And be okay with dealing both at the same time. And, last but, not least, is that there are lots of stories of triumph. And to really curate yours, what does your story of triumph look like? What is your passion? And how does all of that connect?
And it may be evolving and it may be different in 5 years than it is today, but both memories are important,
Yeah.
which is cool. Well, Fidel, can you believe we've been doing this for over an hour?
It, time flies when you're having fun.
Absolutely. And I really
Yeah.
appreciate you being here and being a
Yeah.
part of this. And I really appreciate all of you who have been listening to us and watching us.
Yeah.
We're really excited that you're here. I hope that this has been valuable for you as well and that you've learned something. Fidel, if people want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
I want to say LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
What's your LinkedIn
Yeah,
identifier?
you can find me as Fidel Guzman, comma MBA, and I'll also give you a link so you can accompany it alongside this episode. But feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's going to be the easiest way to get in touch with me, and I'll also have some links if you want to check out my podcast. And hopefully, I'll have that book of poems out
Yeah.
soon.
Well, that will be good. Well, thank you again. And I want again thank you all of you. If you'd like to reach out to Fidel, I'm sure he would appreciate it. I would. And you're welcome to reach out to me. I hope you will. We really value your thoughts and your comments. You can email me at michaelhi@accessibe.com. That's michaelhi at accessibe.com. Or go to our podcast page, which is michaelhingson.com/podcast. That's michaelhingson.com/podcast. Love to hear from you wherever you're listening and watching. Please give us a 5-star rating. We love your reviews. We value them immensely. And if any of you happen to know anyone who you think ought to be a guest on our podcast, and Fidel, that includes you,
Okay, you got
please,
it.
please let us know. Please introduce us to anyone you think ought to be a guest. We value it. Like I said, I'm always interested in learning and meeting new people. It is so much fun to do. So please, if you know anyone, let us know. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to hear from them. So again, we value you being here and really appreciate it. And Fidel, once again, thank you for being here. This has been great.
Michael, it was an honor. Thank you.